Welcome everyone, my name is Cheryl. I'm the Adult Services Librarian here at the library, and first I want to apologize for the warmness of the room. The HVAC in this particular part of the building needs a bit of an upgrade, so we're drawing cold air in from the library with the fans, and we're doing our best to keep it cooler in here, so apologies for that. If you need the restrooms or the water fountain, they're across the lobby. The library is open for another half hour, so we might get some lobby noise, and then after that the library will be closed and it should be quieter out there. Each of the authors is going to speak, and after each one there'll be time for questions. And at the conclusion of the program there will be time for more questions, and there will also be a drawing for the gift baskets. If you have not yet entered the drawing, you can do so right on this table over here. And if you have not helped yourself to snacks, you can also do that over there. There's plenty of yummy looking stuff. And of course the authors will be selling books and signing them afterwards as well. And I think that is it for the introduction part. So first let me introduce the first author. B.K. Froman, also known as Barbara or Barb, is an award-winning writer, radio TV talent, and university educator who lives in Oregon after spending several decades in Oklahoma. Her titles draw readers across many genres and ages as she captures thoughtful and humorous perspectives of people and change. She especially enjoys the camaraderie and quirkiness in small towns and preserves a slice of Americana that is quickly fading. Her awards include Barnes & Noble Top Indie Pick 2018, Laura's Short Fiction 2018-2019, First Chapter Award, Arizona Writers Association, Willa International Award Finalist 2016, and Clackamas Literary Award 2015. Barb uses wry humor and clever dialogue to remind her readers that life is all about change. She is here to read from her most recent release, Hardly Any Shooting Stars Left, from Iron Stream Media. And real quick, I forgot to mention, we are live streaming this tonight, so just be aware of that camera right there. We're live streaming this to YouTube, so kind of keep clear of that camera. Without further ado, let's welcome Barb.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to ask Louise to give me a script, or Cheryl, because I have had logistics a little differently. So whenever you're ready.
So did I.
No, okay, that's fine. We just roll with whatever's happening.
Shall we just wait and have to do all three?
No, let's do it. Let's just go with it.
Okay.
Yes, we got it. So, I'm Barb. I have to stay kind of close to the mic here. So, there we go. There we go. So I asked my husband, I go, I don't know what to talk about tonight because I'm on a different time zone. It's not this one. But thank you, please. We just got in from quite a tour of trying to get out of Europe. So if you know about the airlines and all that's going on. So bear with me. We're still going to try and make this as exciting and enlightening as possible. Because Greg said, my husband said, that's all they really want. Excitement, which we could get naked and dance around, or enlightenment, which, well, we wanted to go there. So one of the things that any writer, and so many of you in this room are writers, that a writer really enjoys is the research part. That's the most fun, is you start looking at things and start asking questions, and that's what catches your mind. And so for me, one of the things that started this book, because Hardly Any Shooting Stars Left has drones in it and 3D printing, which I knew nothing about, but thought was very interesting. And I was actually, I didn't ever tell Greg this, that I was looking at drones because I was trying to figure out how to get a drone to drop a payload of moss kill on the top of the roof so we would never have to do this again. So I found that drones were quite interesting and being used everywhere. So that started that. And then I also, once I started borrowing my son's friend's drone and learned that I did not grow up with joysticks, and so I can't fly it very well, and so they crash, and they often break when they crash. Then you need a 3D printer to print on pieces, or is it really expensive? So that was how it started. But the other thing that I don't talk about very much that was part of the research is risk. And I usually stand on a soapbox and go on and on and on about change, because change, I've arm wrestled with change since my graduate work, many hundreds of years ago. But this is my new thing, is risk. And I want to define risk as uncertainty that matters. So if you got up to this morning, or if you're coming to this presentation and you couldn't decide whether to wear the blue top or the green top, that really doesn't matter. So it's really not much risk. But if you're trying to decide whether or not to stay in a relationship, or get out of a relationship, or change a job, or make an investment, that matters. So uncertainty that matters is risk. And let's just do a little experiment. This is totally unscientific. So one of the easy kind of little internet experiments is when you look at this, and don't shout out loud, just ask yourself, is this water bottle half full or half empty? And you know where I'm going with this. The pessimist sees it as half empty. The optimist allegedly sees it as half full. But the truth is, it's both. The realist says, oh, this is both. And if you're fortunate enough to have a realist as a manager, the manager will say, the water bottle is twice as big as necessary. See, what we're doing is they're stepping back and not focusing on the contents, but focusing on something else in order to assess risk. That's the same thing. It's said that an optimist invented the airplane, but it was the pessimist who came up with the parachute.
I like that.
Same thing with if you're on a boat in the middle of the ocean and a storm comes up, the optimist will say, it came up, it will go. This too will pass. We just need to hang on. I'm sure you've had people tell you that. Just hang on. This will pass. The pessimist will say, holy moly, the wind's blowing sideways, the boat's rocking, you are going to die. So if you're fortunate, you have a captain who is a realist, and the realist will go adjust the sails, because both of those conditions are true. But to get from those conditions to here, to doing something about it, to moving forward, is quite a journey. And in all of our lives, in all the books you've ever read, right here in between that motion to getting toward moving through, that's the story. And that's what we want to know about, because we are wired for stories. We are wired to pick up information that might help us in case we're ever caught in a boat or caught in some kind of catastrophe that we may need. So again, the research on risk was so fascinating that I looked at a young woman, and I'm going to use I'll just start off and just say I took a risk. Most of you haven't heard this story. That this was about 2019, October 2019, and I was sitting in a hotel vestibule in San Antonio, and I was having a panic attack. I didn't know what I had done. I had just been elected president of an international writing organization there at that conference, in which I smiled and thank you. And then I went downstairs to have a panic attack, thinking, I can't do this. I cannot do this. These people are smarter than me. They're more famous than me. They're well-read. I cannot do this. And so I'm considering catching a plane, getting out of there, never being in that organization again. But as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, trying to control breathing, and I can see in the vestibule there's 3 little rooms in there. And I go into the first room, and because there's agents in each one of the rooms, and I thought, you know what? That'll be a good distraction. This will distract me from what's happening. And so I peek in the room and I go, is anyone giving you a pitch right now? And they, no. I go, you want to hear one? And I'm sure they probably thought, oh, after I was finished, they thought, gosh, I'm so sorry I said yes. Because on a pitch, if any of you have done pitches, you practice those for about 2 months. You get it real smooth, so it just sounds like you know everything forward and backward about all books in your genre. And me, I'm just stumbling, going, now the main character, and I forgot her name, but, so I stumbled through that pitch, but I made it out, and you get about 10 minutes. And so then I go to the next room, and a person was just leaving, and I said to the agent in there, hey, want to hear a pitch? She goes, sure. I sat down and did that pitch. I went to the third room and thought, well, I'm on a roll. This is kind of working because I'm not panicked and sweating anymore. So I go to the third room and I gave my pitch, and she said, yeah, I'd like to see 10 pages of that manuscript. And in a most professional voice, I went, you would? No, I believed it was a good book. I mean, I wrote it, I liked it, I thought it was pretty good. But after that pitch, I thought, gee, I must have gotten really a lot better after those first two suffering through this. So 10 pages turned into 50 pages that she asked for, and then she later asked for the full manuscript, which is exactly what every author wants, full manuscript. And then, nothing. I heard nothing whatsoever. COVID had settled over the universe. The world went quiet. Nothing happened. And I thought, oh, well, someday I'll just self-publish it because I like self-publishing. I have a lot more control over everything in the book. So I'll just self-publish that book. And it was about 14 months, a year, and 2 months later that I got a phone call. And she said, have you sold that manuscript yet? And I went, no. She goes, I want it. You do? And so it has worked out very well for me. Again, it was taking a risk that it worked out so well because I did not have time during that period of time to do my own publishing. And so everything kind of worked together in this risk situation. And so hardly any shooting stars left came about in, I want to say almost serendipitously. It is a story, and I'm going to read and then fill in between the blanks. This is what a team came up with as describing this book. It is about murder and mistakes and the humor and the tragedy that is in between. And so we're going to start with a 26-year-old Lexi DePriest. She has always had a problem in fitting in. She has been forced to leave college and return home for her dad's death. Now, many of you have been forced to do something you don't want to do. You don't do it very happily. And if any of you have been working with a 26-year-old, you know that when you ask them to do something, they are always going to take shortcuts to do it. Lexi is no different. She's independent. She says that the horse at the ranch raised her, so she has the social skills that you would get from hanging around with a horse all the time. And so she decides to do ranching using drones, which this doesn't go over very well. In eastern Oregon, this is a tiny little fictional town, because I didn't want to get sued, but it's outside of La Grande. And so she is attempting to drag everyone there into the next century. For them, that would be about the 19th century. So she is using drones, and many of the people around there don't like it, particularly her neighbor, who is an old Vietnam War veteran. She calls him Coot to his face. And they have quite a few arguments back and forth about technology and timing and today and what's right as far as how to ranch and how to do it right. She is comically unaware that her neighbors disapprove of a lot of things that she's doing, and they think she's doing some nefarious activities. And maybe they're right, because a man is found murdered on her property. And she has a lot of guilt about that, particularly because the man is there because of her. I'm not going to tell you why. And because her one and only friend in town is accused of the murder. And she's already irritated the sheriff. She's annoyed him to the nth degree. So her lack of social skills and trying to make things right again really causes her to do a lot of crazy antics. And she is actually kind of like an I Love Lucy. She's making every situation and everything she touches even worse. So it takes an unlikely group of cantankerous misfits to, grudgingly help her. Because remember, she's ostracized most everyone in town. So she has to learn to work with these misfits. And I love putting misfits in books. Those of you who have read my books, you'll notice, because I get such a kick, such a relief. You meet somebody and you think they have it all together. They seem so smart and so intelligent. But when you start getting to know them, kind of digging around, you find they have plenty of skeletons in their closet, just like you. So it's such a relief. So she's got to learn how to work with them and keep them digging through their own past in order for her to find out this murder, to solve it. And either she is going to have to change, or this tiny little Oregon town is going to have to change. So everyone in this story is taking a risk. Now, you won't know that if you're just reading the story. You're going to see action, and you're going to see a lot of twists and a lot of turns and a lot of comedy. But and you can read it on that level. But all my books I like to put a different level on, which is, I call it the roots. That underneath it, as you read it, now that I've cued you in, look for the risks that are being taken and how people deal with those risks, sometimes well, sometimes inefficiently. And I just have to throw in both Helen and Louise, as they talk, listen for risks in their stories, because that's where the story is. I'm going to read, I think I've talked to you about everything. Oh, I wanted to talk to you about the baskets. I don't know if everybody's basket. Mine does have pieces from this story. So the cider, I have cider in there because Lexi's trying to convince these old people, this is what young people drink. You know, we're not beer guzzlers anymore. We're cider and seltzer anymore. So you are going to have that. You have a package of shooting stars in there. You have the food. You have lots of snacks, because in this book you're going to find that she just has the worst diet in the world. She lives off Cheerios most of the time. So lots of things from the basket, but also things that remind you, pause, stop, enjoy life. Because I always believe in leaving everyone with hope. So I'm going to read a little piece. It may not be hopeful, but and it's a short read. I'll set it up that Lexi's finally decided that, I just haven't eaten anything but Vienna sausages and Cheerios for the last week. Maybe that's causing me to be a little testy. And so she goes into the diner, Krusty's Diner. There's only one diner in town on this one street town. She goes into Krusty's Diner, and who should be there, of course, in the morning but Coot and his old buddy. He's over there having breakfast at the table. And Coot is just going on and on, telling Vietnam stories and about the Vietnamese. And she yells at him a couple of times across the diner and telling him she would like to have breakfast without war as a side dish. And they kind of trade exchanges every now and then. But this is the kind of gal that she is. She goes from thinking to acting real quick. So she gets up from her breakfast and she goes over to his table and says, "This is your reminder not to tell bigoted stories anymore." She's talking to Coot. Leaning over the table, Lexi grabbed Coot's coffee mug She shoved it forward, trying to turn it upside down onto his waffles, but the cup caught and whacked the edge of Coot's plate. Hot liquid arced into the air, hitting the old man's face and chest. The mug jumped from her fingers, somersaulting across the table, joining the plate that is now sliding onto the old guy's lap. "Mother, Mary, and Joseph!" Coot yelped as he stood. The plate and mug fell, hitting the floor. White ceramic pieces bounced across the tiles. Globs of egg and syrup stuck to Coot's pants. Coffee dripped from the edge of the table, pooling around his boots. Lexi gasped, her hand frozen in mid-air. Rosalie, who's the one waitress, rushed from her workstation. The other men at the table stood, lifting their plates as though the spreading coffee would melt their dishes. Three women at a nearby second table scooted their chairs back as coffee trailed across the floor. "There was no need to do that," Rosalie growled, glaring at Lexi and tossing out dish towels. "Sure, he's loud. Sure, he's irritating, but you know better." "I'm sorry. I really didn't mean for—" "Move out of the way," Rosalie huffed. Lexi hurried to the register. She pulled a credit card from her wallet and waited. When Rosalie had the table wiped, she threw the wad of towels at the mess on the floor and took long, strided steps to the till. She punched the register's key like an angry one-fingered piano player. I didn't mean to make you extra work. I'll pay for everything, including the old Coot's meal. I didn't expect him to stand and the dishes to break. I thought, you don't think." Rosalie gave her a doomsday stare. "We all know you're stressed out, trying to help Rick." This is her one friend accused of murder. "You're trying to keep up the ranch all by yourself. You're trying to run your business, but you need to go home. Lock the door and rest up until you stop acting like a bull fighting bumblebees. That'll be $48, and we don't take credit cards." "Okay." Lexi stared wide-eyed. The undertones of her voice cracked as she whispered, "That's a little stiff, isn't it? A plate, a mug, your breakfast, and you're buying Sol Wixley, Coot. 2 breakfasts, the one you ruined and another one." Lexi nodded, her eyes closed as she took a breath. Finally she whispered, "I know I don't have it all together. I'm sorry." She glanced sheepishly around the diner. Customers stared back. She knew each and every face in that diner, but she couldn't gin up enough bravado to ask for money to finance her idiocy. Coot was the only one not looking at her. He grumbled, rubbing egg deeper into his pants as he attempted to clean them. Lexi leaned over the mints and the fishbowl of business cards on the countertop, saying quietly, "I could help clean up, maybe wash dishes." The waitress gave a snort. "You've got 15 minutes to bring me the money. You hear me?" With a quick nod, Lexi headed for the door. But the loud growl of her stomach turned off her brain and goaded her into her next stunt. In a sideways dash, she grabbed her plate of eggs and biscuit from the table and ran through the front door. Rosalie's shouts followed her. Thank you so much. It was fun. I'll leave you with the final thing that Lexi would tell you. Take a risk. Now we're going to go with Helen Wand. And Helen is a dear, dear friend. She was raised in the Columbia Gorge in a region called, I need to hesitate. Are we going to do questions and answers at the end, do you think? Okay. So back to Helen. She is in a region called Pleasant View, which is just east of Multnomah County here. She studied medical technology and graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Marylhurst University before working for many years in the field of clinical laboratory science. After teaching evening phlebotomy courses in various Oregon and Washington community colleges in 2001, Helen developed, certified, and taught in the Clinical Laboratory Assistant Phlebotomy Program at Clackamas Community College until her retirement in 2019. Get a load of this. This will put all of us to shame. She is currently the president of Troutdale Historical Society, as well as an active member in the Crown Point Historical Society and a member of various other local historical societies. She has filled the position of secretary at East Multnomah Pioneer Association for many, many years. And they told her it's a lifetime commitment, and she believed them. So she's that kind of wonderful person. Helen began her writing career in 1999 when she and her mother enrolled in a writing class at Mount Hood Community College. She has gathered her bygone stories for most of her life at her mother's knee. Her fascination with history led to her, and it says, late blooming efforts to write and publish, but they are not. They are great. She's published 2 historical novels, Where the Eagles Nest and Echoes of Forgotten Places. Or if you prefer, it's easier to remember, just Eagles and Echoes. I give you the wonderful Helen Wand.
I don't know if I can live up to that or not. I thank you, Barb. I think that Barb is Oregon's Molly Ivins. I know I'm dating myself when I say that, but she is such a humorous writer. We go back a long way. This bio kind of shows you the convoluted journey that I took to begin to write, and it's kind of strange that it ended up writing, actually. So I want to tell you just a little bit about the sense of place and time in the chapter that I'm going to read you. These chapters are short. You can read one in the bathroom easily. Or wherever. It's the fall of 1909. It's a homestead in the Pleasant View area of the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon, which is just east of the Sandy River when you go into Troutdale. Okay. It's 134 square miles, actually, up in that area. It's called East Multnomah County, actually. There's a family living in a homestead. There's 4 brothers, chronologically, Ferd, Arnold, Jack, and Alec. 1 daughter, Josie, living with a widowed mother. The other sisters, there's 2 of them in Portland, working to help send cash back to the homestead. And the oldest daughter is married. This is about going to Gresham from the homestead. So my sister Pat and I figured out that it was 8.1 miles one way from the homestead to Gresham, where the intersection of Main and Powell is in Gresham. You go on Baseline, which is now Stark. You cross the Stark Street Bridge, which used to be the Nielsen Bridge, okay? So the reason I chose this chapter was that it kind of shows the cultural changes that were going on at that time that actually really totally changed how we look at things now because of this cultural change. Plus, it shows the family's interaction together. So it's called the 1904 Model C as in cat, Ford. Didn't even know there was such a thing. But like Barb said, research is so much fun. I found what we've been looking for, Ferd announced as he pulled the team to a halt. What's that? Alex walked out of the barn, a harness in one hand and a screwdriver in the other. The perfect auto and the perfect price. Ferd stepped off the wagon, his words coming fast with excitement. It needs some work, but you and Jack are good at that sort of thing, and Arnold and I can straighten out the body. What's all the racket out here? 18-year-old Jack stuck his head out the door with a curious look. Oh, nothing, Ferd grinned. Yeah, nothing at all, Alex chimed in. He may just have found us an automobile. Where is it, and does it run? Well, that's why it's so cheap. It hasn't been run for a couple of years. Ferd paused as he bent to unhook the horses. We cranked on it, but we weren't able to get much of a pop out of it. Where is it and how much is it? Arnold asked as he came around the corner of the barn with the empty feed bucket in his hand. I saw it behind Metzger's store over in Gresham. When I asked, the storekeeper told me that it belonged to Harvey Metzger. Ferd handed the reins to Arnold and began to gathering the harness. I went out and back to take a look, and I noticed it had a bad dent in the front fender. Looked like it was rubbing on the tire. The lights busted out, too. Is that all? That could be easily fixed, Alex said, his voice eager. So I decided to look up this Harvey fella. I found him at Kidder's Hardware, which worked out well because I needed to pick up some of those harness rings, too. For crying out loud, get on with it, Arnold, rarely impatient, started to lose his composure. Yeah, well, it seems as though Metzger was speeding along Powell Road after one of his buddies challenged him to a race, and the car spooked a team of horses. Ferd lifted his cap and scratched his head. Alex shuffled his feet. Jeez, he murmured under his breath, knowing full well that if he made any kind of a fuss at all, Ferd would just slow down even more. Holy smokes, he heard Jack mutter. Well, anyway, I asked Harvey how much he wanted for it, and since it hadn't been run for a while, it was pretty well beat up. So Arnold asked, his voice a hint of irritation. He could get away with it because he's almost as old as Ferd, but one of the younger fellows wouldn't have been able to. He was as big as Ferd and had beat him several times when they got to wrestling. So anyway, he wanted $100 for it. Arnold whistled. $100? Yeah, so I started to walk away, and then I hollered back over my shoulder and told him he'd never get that price for the shape it's in. Ferd shook his head and continued, heck, he didn't even know if the darn thing had run. The men stood, Jack with his arms through the bib of his overalls, and Alex leaning against the fence waiting for the next sentence. Arnold looked like he might strangle his brother, but Ferd was blissfully mulling the story over in his mind. So Metzger changed his tune a little and said we should go and see if it would start before we settled on a price. I told him that was a fine idea, and so we did. Of course, it was out of gas, and so we had to go find some, and then we took turns cranking on it. The thought ran through my mind about the 10th crank that maybe horses might just be the better bargain. He laughed and continued. We got it to cough a couple times, but thought maybe some tinkering might get it to running. Yeah, I'm sure we can, Alex's face showed the eagerness to try. I told the Metzger fellow I wouldn't pay more than $25 for something that wouldn't even start, Ferd continued. So he says it's worth $50 if it's worth a nickel. And I says, not so. I let him simmer a bit, and I said, I'll give you $30 and not a penny more. And he said, sold. So the three brothers let out a collective sigh of relief. So I guess we tow it home with the horses. Arnold said, happy they had been able to finally buy a team, but after last season's crops left him with some extra money, we'll have to rig up some kind of a hitch. The following Monday, Ferd and Arnold left, each leading a horse. The harnesses were secured over the back of Arnold's horse, and Ferd's horse carried the chain and cleves which they planned on wrapping around the frame of the automobile to act as a hitch. After they arrived and paid Metzger the $30, they led the horses around back to the brand new, slightly used automobile. Before they hooked it up, they had to straighten the fender so they could steer it. But the roads were dry and the auto was lightweight, so towing wasn't much of a chore. On the way home, they decided to take turns. One rode and steered the auto while the other led the horses. They switched places about halfway and decided that the machine was pretty tricky to maneuver, not at all like horses in a wagon. It's going to take some practice, Arnold observes, as he hurried to steer away from the bluff while climbing the road that passed the Nielsen place. When they pulled in by the barn, Jack and Alex rushed over with Josie close behind. There hadn't been that much excitement on the place since the Christmases when they were kids. Josie was ready for some fun. She climbed in and sat on the leather seat, amazed at the comfort, having never ridden in anything but a wagon. Her eyes sparkled. And it can take at least 6 of us at a time. I can't wait to show everyone. Well, let's not tell anyone until we get it running, Alex suggested, gazing at the engine. The last time he and Jack had gone to Portland, he'd bought a magazine that explained how the gasoline engine worked. He and Jack had pored over it until they both knew it by heart. White space. With further inspection, they found that they needed at least one larger screwdriver and a couple of smaller monkey wrenches. It wouldn't hurt to have a pair of pliers either, Jack observed as they inspected the engine. Did any of you men even look at that top? Josie pointed to the tonneau cover over the 2 seats. The fringe is mostly gone. It got rips everywhere. For heaven's sakes, it's not going to keep anyone dry. I guess you're right, Arnold muttered as he made a careful inspection. It's made of canvas. Next time we make a run up to Palmer, we can pick up a piece at the mercantile store. Maybe they'll trade produce for it, Ferdinand. What about the fringe, Josie wanted to know. After all, it started out with fringe. It should continue to have fringe. Arnold nodded with the expression of something close to understanding, while Ferd answered his sister with a scoff. No need of that. We just want a cover to keep the rain off. He frowned and added, how about you working on the cover? We'll make that your job. Josie badly wanted to be part of this exciting project, but no way was she going to throw away a perfectly good bargaining chip. She waited as she thought over the prospect. If I work on it, I'm in for a 5th, she finally said. I will own a 5th. What the heck? Jack looked disgusted, felt he already had to share it too many ways. Josie held her ground. I cook and wash and clean for you boys. That's not a lot of fun, you know. She stopped, folded her arms, and let that piece of information settle. Now there's something fun to do, and I want to do it. She paused again before continuing. And I want my share for the work I put in. I can do other things too. As far as I can tell, it looks to me like I know just about as much about this as you fellas do. Arnold nodded. She's right, you know. If we had to survive on our own cooking, we'd be in bad shape, and we know darn little about making this auto work. She's always been capable, Ferd agreed. I don't see why not. We need that top. And reliable, Arnold added. Josie took a deep breath and said, there's one more thing. What's that? You'll teach me to drive. If you men can do it, I can do it. Thank you. It was as much fun to ride as it was to read. Maybe more. So the last, but not least, my friend Louise, whose fault this all is. She did it all. We just said okay. In the right places. I'd like to introduce Louise Carnachan. Says that if people had behaved well at work, she would never have had to have the career that she has. Louise has been a Westland resident since 2018 after moving from Seattle. Good move. Her recent book, Work Jerks, How to Cope with the Difficult Bosses and Colleagues, is the culmination of a 40-year career in organization development. It is based on her experiences over decades of teaching leadership and communication skills, coaching managers and teams, as well as putting in her own time as an employee in the trenches. She continues to coach a select group of leadership clients and writes a workplace advice blog from her home, which she shares with two feline office mates. So I just can't tell you how wonderful that book is. My niece bought it for her husband, and I won't even go into why.
Thanks, Helen. Well, I'm home. I'm in my West Lynn local public library, where I wrote about half of Work Jerks because I got into a slump. Anybody who's a writer here ever been in a slump? Yeah, so I got into that slump, and I know what to do in a slump. You go to study hall. So I just took myself right into that reading room, and I wrote every day, 7 days a week, for a couple of hours a day. Guess what? You can finish a book that way. It really does work. So apparently I needed a capstone project to be able to, quote, retire. And this is mine. So I wrote Work Jerks. You know, the title kind of says it all, right? You know, how to cope with difficult bosses and colleagues. Lexi DePriest, who Barb writes about quite eloquently, she's a difficult person, I would say. But you know, sometimes fiction does not even match what really happens in real life. And I'm sure many of you can attest to that you've had people you've worked with that you're thinking, how does this happen? How on earth? So this is kind of a Hints from Louise book, if any of you remember that. You know, so you pick it up when you have a stain that needs to be removed, but in this case it's a person that, I won't say needs to be removed, but something needs to change about what's going on in the situation. And I wrote it about work because I decided I would use those examples since I knew them so well. But people are people are people. So this applies to friends and family, to places of worship, to volunteer activities, to sports groups you might be part of, to HOAs. I have a lot of neighbors here from my HOA. Boards, any place there are people. I want to just define a term here about what's a jerk, because a jerk in many ways is in the eye of the beholder. So what I find jerksome behavior, you might not. You might think it's okay. But what it is consistently irritating behavior over time. We're not talking about a one-off. It's not, because we're all jerks some of the time, right? We've all been a jerk. Hopefully it's occasionally and not all the time. But the person who gets your goat is the one who consistently does whatever that thing is that they do or don't do, because sometimes it's the absence of behavior, like working, that gets your crop. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about a jerk. And it's sort of alarming to know that there are so many types of jerks that I filled a book. So everybody who is in this space of writing about communicating with different kinds of people has some kind of taxonomy for this. I came up with 9 jerkotypes. That's right, they're jerk archetypes. And under each jerkotype, we have subtypes. So there's quite a few in this book. Again, hints from Louise. When you get to that point where you're thinking, what on earth? Then you go shopping for what is my stain remedy here, and look for that. You ever wonder if it's you the answer to that would be yes, sometimes it is you, because relationships take at least two to tango, if not three or more, and you're in the mix. So if it's somebody that you're having trouble with, there's always that thing of, what's my contribution to this problem? But I have outlined all these different types of jerkotypes, and I thought, now, when I look out into this wonderful group tonight, which I'm sure is full of trouble, which particular jerk should I read about? And I thought the one that is probably tried and true that so many people have dealt with over the years is kind of that classic whiny pants. The person who always has something wrong. The person who I would call a classic victim. Does that ring true for anybody? You go, oh yeah, I know who that person is. So I call that type the why me. The why me always seems to be whiny. I never move up, I'm ignored, I can't get a break, etc. People who feel helpless in this way assume everyone else has it better. They see the world as a zero-sum game. Anyone with more money, skill, talent, knowledge, education has lessened the why me's opportunities. They're envious and bitterly jealous. This pervasive belief most likely started early in life, and it's a hard one to shake. There's both a finality to this state, this is the way it is, and a passiveness. As a result, I can't do anything about it. All of us can go through rough patches when life feels unfair. The why me's victimized state isn't transitory, it's a persona that endures. You'll recognize them by some of the following. They point fingers at them as the cause of their suffering. They may not believe in themselves enough to seek education, training, certification, or mentoring to move up. They play out their pattern with next to no insight that they're the common denominator in each and every situation. They have little interest in self-awareness. After a particularly ego-damaging event, they may ask the question, why does this happen? But the window of vulnerability is brief before they're back to blaming others. They may be desperate to feel special and attempt to damage others' reputations to gain sought-after status. They may use criticism, gossip, or lies to make someone else less so they can be more. They may spew vitriol about work, local, national, or world conditions as if that in itself is a contribution to solving them. Wailing Wendy. A number of years ago, an acquaintance introduced me to Wendy, whom I saw with some regularity. I admired Wendy's intellect and humor, but her frequent claim of victim status was tiresome. She had a lot going for her, but rather than count her blessings, she engaged in a lot of complaining. Nothing was ever good enough. Money was the pet focus, and she was constantly on the edge of financial ruin. Eventually, her fear became so overwhelming that she shut down her business and found a job. Prior to opening her consultancy, Wendy had left full-time employment due to a terrible boss. You won't be surprised to learn that no matter where she was, Wendy had a crappy supervisor. The next job was no different. She'd previously known this woman as a colleague and thought she was terrific. However, within weeks of her new gig, the old laments began. I don't get enough recognition. Other people get more acknowledgement than I do. No one talks to me. I'm treated differently than everyone else. I don't know how I'm doing because the boss won't tell me. I'm not paid enough. Other people receive more. You get the picture. Thanks to her insecurity, she was a pain in the patootie. No amount of praise was enough. She needed to be the favorite. She wanted people to include her, but did nothing to make herself someone others would want to befriend. She wore her neediness like a coat of flypaper. No wonder colleagues steered clear of her. Eventually, Wendy's mounting anxiety led her to her most feared conclusion. She was fired. She became a temperamental leech to her boss and too difficult for coworkers to handle. Although she'd repeatedly played out this scenario in her career, she continued to lack any insight about her contributions. It's hard to be friends with someone like this, at work or anywhere for that matter. It isn't a mutual relationship. One side always needs or demands more. So we don't just leave it there, we go into the advice, okay? So this is the part about how to remove the stain, okay? How to deal with the why me, advice for coworkers. Recognize that you are up against someone's basic beliefs about themselves and the world. Beliefs are the rules we've set for how life works, so it's hard but not impossible to challenge them. You're unlikely to change anyone's mind, but you might be able to help them reconsider their thinking. Here's some ideas. State the belief. It's possible they've had this background noise running through their head for so long they're not even aware of it. Here's an example of a belief you might call out based on what you've heard them say. Sounds like you think it's not worth completing an education at your age. They might be surprised to hear that's what they believe. Counter with contrary evidence. Liz just got her degree and she's older than you. You'll probably get a yes but earful about why Liz is special, but it's worth a try. Ask a question like, why do you think that's true? This pushes them to explain the rationale behind the belief. Of course, you don't need to understand, but they do. Sometimes what they say is so nonsensical, they'll stop to reconsider. Decide how willing you are to invest in this person. How much you're drained or not by them has to do with the amount of energy you've got available. Try establishing parameters for your interactions. For example, you can set up a time limit for how long you'll listen to their litany of work problems. You can say something like, Wendy, you've got 5 more minutes to talk about how awful your boss is. The timer is on. Go. Don't be surprised if you have to revisit these rules every so often or frequently. How to deal with the why me advice for managers. Review the guidance above for coworkers to see what might apply in your situation. Set up guidelines about how much you can or will attend to their needs. Even if you could provide constant praise or reassurance, it'll never be enough to offset their insecurity. Help them recognize the indicators of when they've done a good job so they can give themselves a pat on the back and not need you so much. So that's a little taste test of how the book is laid out. And you know, if along the way when you're reading one of these you think, oh, I wonder if that's me. Right? So I go back to when I was in college, I took abnormal psychology. Each and every diagnosis I thought was mine, which is kind of frightening. And as I was writing these, I'm thinking, oh, I've done that. I've done that. But I have a worksheet for people, you know, just in case they're a little concerned that maybe they are kind of like this. And you can go through the questions as an assessment and see some advice about what to do. So that is Work Jerks. Thank you so much. So rather than to invite Cheryl up, I think since I'm standing here, I'll just see if we have questions from the audience and we can have any of the authors speak. Does anybody have a question? Yes.
I have a question about the source or sources of your book. Did you keep, over your years of working in HR and organizational behavior, did you keep cases or notes on particular types in order to give you insight and feather for your book?
Well, so the interesting thing, I think what attracted me to my work is I love stories, right? I love people's stories. So, I mean, people are endlessly fascinating, and I had a long time to listen to people's stories. So I have been a journaler for many, many years. But I actually didn't go back and look at my journals. I remember these things. And then, of course, what I needed to do was to adjust them. So just in case the guilty party actually picked it up and read it, they would recognize themselves. And I think it was dear Pat who said to me, oh no, people will look at it and go, nah, that's not me. But I did feel like I got a little close to the bone on a couple of my examples. And so I made adjustments. And in fact, at one point, I sent 2 of my case examples to somebody who knew both of the people that they were based on. But I didn't say anything about that. I just said, when you read this, do you recognize anyone you know? And the one that I really worried she'd recognize, she didn't. The other one she did. So I made a few adjustments. Plus, that's somebody who will never read the book. But yeah, I seem to hang on to stories like this for whatever reason. Yeah. It's kind of horrifying, isn't it? Any other questions? Yes.
How did you come up with 9?
You know, that was kind of weird, was to try and figure out what's the right amount. And it was as I just kept trying to find the themes of types, because I had stories, you know, and I would begin to list the stories in an outline form, and they go, where does that fit? And maybe 9's not the right amount. You know, I think 5 would be easier for people to remember, but I don't think you need to remember these. I think, you know, I was hopeful that people could find their person. And if they were too broad of a category, it would be hard to dig in to figure out which one. So I don't know whether I hit it right or not, but that's the way it ended up. And then after I wrote the whole book, oh, I need to go back and say, I wrote the book in 2019. You know where this is going. So I had set it out to about 30 beta readers after the writing group had seen it, because I wanted to make sure I was getting, you know, gender and age and job categories represented. And I got feedback, and so I'm rewriting, you know, and I get stuff rewritten, and then the pandemic starts. And after, remember 2 weeks? We'll be in lockdown for 2 weeks. So after 2 months, I thought, oh, we're never going back to work the same way again. And I just wrote a book about interpersonal communication at work. So I had not included as many examples as there are now of remote work. I had already included some about email, you know, because this isn't new. We've been doing remote work and people do all these conferencing, virtual conferencing, but it became ubiquitous. And then we learned all the problems with virtual meetings. So there's a little piece in here called Things We Don't Need to See or Hear. Because one of my jerk types is the habitually annoying jerk. And under that is a potpourri of just not the worst possible behaviors. The worst is the narcissist. It's at the beginning. But we're talking about things like the person who puts fish in the microwave in the break room, right? Or the person who can't ever seem to turn off stuff. Well, there you go. I had a next door office mate who had a horn on his phone each time he got a text. And you know, I'm not passive aggressive. I might be a little aggressive sometimes, but I was assertive. I said, "Could you turn that off?" Nope. Apparently you would not. So we existed with that for a long time. But the habitually annoying jerk, for example, has a bunch of little niggly, irritating bits that they just make going to work not so fun. It's not like they're disastrous or the ones that you go home and you tell it, well, you might go home and tell people about because they happen every day. But they're just those little things. Well, so I finished the book. We're in the middle of COVID. And then I go, you could read this whole thing and not find your person because it's not a person, it's the culture. You know, the whole dang culture stinks. So I added a chapter at the very, very end about when it's the culture. You know, when that's rotten, people get in line or they leave. And the ones who get in line, it's hard to live in a cesspool. So there are many good books on culture, and that's really getting into organization development, and I thought, I'm not going there. There are other good books, but I'm giving it a nod. And but there's a resource section where some of my favorite books I list, but there's good material out there on stinky cultures. If anyone's ever worked in one, you know what they're like. No good. Yeah. Any other questions? How about from my colleagues before we wrap this up? Yes.
So I just looked up a couple of your books, and I looked up Barb's in particular, and I didn't find an audio version. And I was wondering if you guys are considering that, because some of us don't stick to the pages very well, but we can absorb it if we're multitasking. So do you have any inclination to make an audiobook?
At this point in time, I don't. But if I run into an actor that has a great voice, then, Helen, how about you?
I've thought about it too, and I think that it's something that we really need to look into.
But thank you for looking.
Yeah, I mean, my mom's a librarian, and the two of us are terrible readers. We're good with reference most of the time, so that'll work. But for stories, it's so much easier if you can do it while you're driving or something like that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, audiobooks are terrific.
Well, Toucan and the Lake Lutheran Ladies are trilogies, I think. Are you planning a trilogy with shooting stars?
You know, I wasn't, but I left a porthole in it if I could, if I wanted to, and so I thought, oh, I've left a little loose end here. So far, nobody has mentioned the loose end, but I've gotten 2 letters so far saying, we'd like another book because we want to see more of Lexi, this irritating character who's kind of on her way. She's kind of, I don't say like a female Jack Reacher, you know, she's, you like parts of her, you don't like parts of her, and you just want to see her make her whole metamorphosis. So you're about halfway through the metamorphosis. So right now I've got a 1920s historical novel that I'm knee deep in. So it may come out. I won't make you a promise when. Thank you.
Louise, now that now that you've finished the book, and are you working on another book, or are you writing? And if so, what are you doing?
So I write a work advice blog that's up every other week, so that takes a chunk of my time. But yeah, I thought, okay, capstone project, one and done. And then I went, oh, there's actually something else I could write about. So it's premature to talk about where it's going, but I have begun writing. Yes. It's addictive. I've got some of my writer companions here that we all know. Yeah.
Helen, are you ready to start another book? That's a big one.
I'm writing one.
Are you?
It's slowly coming together.
That's great.
Yep, we keep bringing pages to Chrysalis. So we're all members of the Chrysalis Women's Writers Group from Clackamas Community College. Our fearless leader, Pat Lycan, is right here. And a number of you put up your hands if you're in the group, because we have a number of our writers here. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to bring your work and get critique. So I think, are we ready to wrap
I just
it?
wanted to also add, I'm going to take this off, to you, everyone here, you had other choices of things you could do tonight, so thank you. That's very, very, very kind. And the other thing that is not said very often, that if you love a book or writing or a writer, the kindest thing you can do is not necessarily buy the book. You can also read it in the library or anything, but one of the kindest things you can do for any author is go leave, if you like the book, go leave a review.
Please, yes.
If you didn't like it, don't leave it.
Well, every book needs one star, right? Yeah, just to show that it's not all your friends and family, but it's true. Thank you for mentioning that. I also want to thank Cheryl Hill and the Wesleyan Library. Thank you for hosting us tonight. We are grateful.